Welcome back to the studio. Let's take a look at leather work surfaces. We all use one. There's all different types. So by the end, you're going to have an idea of what they're used for. What are the most common surface types? We'll look at examples of each. And then we'll give you some tips when considering what to get for your shop and what may work best for you. So with that, let's dive right in. Leather work surfaces encompass the various surfaces and areas used for leather working. They can include tables, mats, stone slabs, and a number of other materials that we're going to use when crafting, tooling, setting hardware, and other types of activities. Leatherworking doesn't require too many surfaces, though the ones that you do choose, you want to make sure you choose them well so that you get good results from what they offer and you enjoy them in terms of how they fit your working style. So once you have them set up, you'll be in good shape, and there's a couple of key things to look for. A smooth cutting surface, a quality cutting mat, and a leather workshop with a strong table. And so with that, let's check out a few of the most popular ones one by one so you can see them up close. The Anvil. So here I have a pretty small tabletop anvil. It's actually a vise, and on the back here, we have a little bit of an anvil to it. So these can be useful for setting rivets, for example. If you don't have like a stone slab or a really sturdy table, you could put this on the end of your table, just mounting it there, and then you'll be able to have a work surface here, a little bit of an anvil for doing that. They absorb a lot of force, so if you are doing any kind of a technique where you need something to absorb a lot of force and you don't have a sturdy table, finding a place to mount an anvil may help with that because it'll absorb some of that force in the metal part of it and give you at least an opportunity. If you can, a sturdy table would be best, and then furthermore, getting a stone slab to absorb the force across your tooling or hardware setting would be ideal. However, for some folks, they may already have a vice grips with an anvil end, and this could be a good way if you don't have something else already. Next up, it's here already, the self-healing cutting mat. And what this is essentially a layered plastic surface that will allow you to use your knife and other cutting implements on it, and that will leave marks in your surface here. However, since it's relatively soft compared to the knife blades, it will not dull your knife. And that's really important for knives and other kinds of bladed tools, that they have a surface like this that you can cut on safely. Underneath here, we'll get more into it as a wooden table, but this is your standard self-healing cutting mat. Self-healing comes into play when the marks that you make from your knife eventually can be smoothed out, either over time as this material kind of naturally pushes back together, or you can kind of push on it like this and you'll see that the lines that a knife had made goes away. These can last for a pretty long time. When looking for one, it's important to buy a quality one because the cheaper ones are out there. They're not going to perform as well, and they'll start to wear and even rip a little bit over time the more you use them. Where the higher quality mats are going to look better, perform better, and last longer, and they're not too much more expensive. When getting one, you could choose from different colors. Most common are going to be white, gray, green, and black. So it really all depends upon your vision preferences and what you like as a backdrop to your leather material. I tend to like the black because the brighter leathers kind of stand off in contrast to it. Some folks may like that white, or they may like even the green, and so totally personal preference. Though once you get a feel for it, you'll probably lean towards one or another, and that's where the color options provide different options again for what you like best. Also, they have different measurement markings on them. Some are going to have inches, some are going to have centimeters, and you can see there's different geometric patterns on some versus others. So you could even use these as cutting guides if you want fixed 90-degree angles. This is going to get you there. You also have some with these other angles as well, 45, 60, 30, and that can become helpful if you're trying to cut something and looking for a pretty precise angle. Some of these have them on there. Another thing to keep in mind in terms of quality, believe me, I wish I didn't have to say it, but I do. Some of them don't have the measurements right on them. They're printed incorrectly, so you think you may be getting a 24-inch, but you're really not. Maybe it's 23 inches and they're skipping a number or things like that. So really look at reviews and also look at the product photos and the one that you get to make sure that it is what you need and the actual numbers are right. So you're not cutting out something that you think is 16 inches and it's actually 15. That did not happen with this brand. It was with other brands. And so, but just keep that in mind as well. Do your due diligence. But yep, cutting mat is probably one of the most basic staples of leather working, and also not very visually stimulating to talk to on a video camera. So that's the summary of it. You definitely want one in your studio, and there's lots of great options out there for you to pick from. The Japanese cutting mat. So this is a really cool one. It's essentially a pretty thick, dense surface that is mostly of like a plastic type material, plasticky rubber kind of material. And they come in different sizes and different thicknesses, but the idea is that they provide a relatively dense and soft surface for when you're doing activities like using your hole punches and things like that. So when you're punching a hole in your material, and I could show an example here, this tool we're going to strike this tool with our maul. So it'll be putting striking force on it. And when we do that, it's going to push it through this leather material into whatever is below it. And so if we're doing that with our cutting mat, we're going to actually start to put some pretty significant marks in our cutting mat. Our cutting mat is usually meant for, straight bladed tools coming through. And that's going to leave it, looking good and working the best and longest. So when we're putting like straight downward, vertical force into it, we typically want another type of secure pad below your tool and even above your cutting mat. Some people can definitely get away with their cutting mat below it. I prefer having something in between simply because we are providing extra striking force in a vertical way right down into that material. So the Japanese cutting mat is pretty thick, and we can put our tool into it and strike it. And even then, pulls out, our hole's there, and you can see a little mark left right here from that hole, because that's where the tool went into this material. And again, that's a good thing because it's way softer than the blade on our tool. That's going to help keep our blade structurally intact as well as sharper longer. And it's also going to help give us a nice clean cut through this because our blade isn't jamming up against a harder surface right as it gets to the end. It can actually go fully through that material right into here. So they're pretty helpful to have depending on, if that's your preference. And for the same task, we'll explore a few other examples of what you could use for surface materials there. The poly cutting board. Here we go. So this is essentially a cutting board. You see it most often in the kitchen, used for that, for leather craft. It can also be used for a kind of a surface below your striking implement techniques. And so it absorbs impact and vibration, as well as the softness of this cutting board, protecting the edge of your blade. Since this is going to be essentially less strong than your blade, so your blade can go into it, relatively comfortably, and keeping your blade sharp and protecting, your cutting mat even below that. So let's check it out in action. So here we've got our cutting board, our poly board, and so it's a plastic type material. And then we'll just hit this here, and we'll take a look. And there's the hole in our item, and you can see nothing really big, on this board at all. And our tool will stay in good shape. So these are relatively inexpensive if you're looking to just get started, or if you're looking to get a large surface that you can work with like this. They're going to be relatively affordable and give you a good way to get started, with your striking techniques. Another option is a Novolene chopping block. So Novolene is a synthetic material, and it's essentially just another thick plastic type rubber that helps absorb the shock while the tools are going through. And it can be used again to protect those tools as well as provide a kind of denser surface to absorb some of the shock and striking force used during those techniques. Most often these are red in color. And different sizes are available depending on what suits your workspace the best. Stone slabs. They are incredibly dense materials made of natural stone. Most often, you can get them in a granite or a quartz. Quartz is the most popular for stone slabs because of its density and its properties. However, we don't want that to be right under our tools we want, because obviously if we're putting a metal bladed tool into quartz, quartz is very hard and dense. It's probably going to damage our tools. So what we want this for is primarily a shock absorption surface. And so we'll put the stone slab on our desk, and on top of the stone slab, we're going to put whatever cutting surface or whatever more plastic rubber surface, whether it's a Japanese cutting mat or if it is a nylon cutting board, that'll go above the stone slab. And that way, when we are striking on top of our softer surface, the stone slab will also absorb some of that shock, making the bounce of the tool much less noticeable, helping to give better quality results in that technique that we're using, whether it's punching holes or even tooling leather, because the less that there's vibration pushing back on your tool and kind of shifting that, the more consistent the application of that tool, whatever it is, hole punching, tooling, etc., the more consistent that will be, and the better the quality of the final product will be. So these come in different sizes. 6x6 inch can work fine if you're setting hardware or punching holes. If you're doing something a little larger, a 12x12 can provide a larger surface, and two, a little more of the dissipation of that force, just due to the fact that it's larger and it can absorb more. You could find them, in home improvement stores. You may be able to find them in kitchen remodeling stores. You can also buy them specifically for leathercraft, though essentially there's no difference. They may be shaped a little differently, but what you're looking for ultimately in the end is a relatively thick piece, of quartz or granite. Primarily quartz first, and if you can, granite can work well too. In terms of thickness, you want usually about 1 inch or 1.25 inches. Something thinner can work as well, though in this case, something a little thicker will provide you better results generally, given that it's going to be more dense and you have more mass of that material to absorb the shock and vibration. The Poundo Board. That's right, the popular Poundo. These are rubber surfaces used for blade protection and shock absorption, just like other surfaces that we have looked at. When cutting, you could use this to have your knife on top, or primarily when you're punching, you could use this as a backdrop for your tools. So again, let's check out an example of that. Let's put that on here and line this up, and we'll give it a punch. We see our tool goes through our leather material, and right here you can see into the board where our mark is left. So again, the benefit of that is it allows this to pass through the material safely, giving you a clean cut all the way through, and then going into this material, which is soft, also protecting your blade. So the Poundo board is essentially just another incarnation of that soft backer that you could use for those techniques. It comes in a variety of sizes. This one is about 12x12. It's about 1/4 inch thick, and it's relatively sturdy, relatively durable, and also helps with shock absorption. So the Poundo board is pretty popular, and another one you could look at if you're looking for that type of a shock absorption piece. We've all got tools, and being organized goes a long way in an efficient shop. So a leather tool holder or stand is a device used to hold and organize your leather tools. Primarily, it's going to make them easy to access, and so you know where they are. Because when you're in the middle of a project, you want to be able to reach for the tool that you need next and keep in that project flow. So a good tool holder can do that. They usually stand upright and are easily moved around, and there can be multiple levels to a holder. You may have drawers in yours, you may have different stamp holders, and basically places to put your different tools. Your holder may grow as you grow as a crafter. As you get more tools or you specialize in a certain area of the craft, you may find and or make holders that will benefit what you've got and what's most convenient for you to reach and use while you're crafting. When you're just starting out, it could be something as easy as a toolbox, and then as you get more advanced in the craft, you could make something custom, purchase pre-made storage systems, or a combination of any of those. Essentially, it's whatever works best for you and the space that you're working in. The Cork board tool holder. So this is essentially just a cork block, and you could use it to hold leatherworking awls. You could stick your sewing needles in there. Cork is a natural firm material, and it's easily penetrated by sharp tools. So if you wanted to keep your knife blades in there, if you're using a hobby knife, your awl, your needles again, And once inserted, the firmness of the cork generally holds those things in place. And so it's an easy way to kind of store those weird shapes or things that are kind of sharp but that you may want to access, but you don't want to put them all away because you may need it soon. A cork board can do that. Keep them all pretty much within reach and the sharp points inside that cork board, keeping it a little easier for you. They come in a lot of sizes. A helpful shape for crafting is going to be like a 4-inch by 6-inch cork board. You may be able to have it in a wooden base. That way it kind of sits in there securely, or you could just have like a cork block, on top of your desk. Really whatever works best for you and makes it easier. Leather weights. So there's a lot of different things you could use for this, and there are specific ones made. And essentially what they are small metal devices that are used to hold leather in place while cutting, stamping, punching, tooling, things like that. They have very smooth, polished surfaces. They're made of very dense materials, usually metal, often brass, and they're not going to mark or mar the leather when it's placed on top. Because again, you're going to be putting this on your leather when you're cutting something out or making marks. So we really don't want it to leave a mark behind, even subtle ones, because that'll kind of ruin that piece of leather if it's something you're going to use on the outside part of a project. That's why you want something sturdy, dense, and smooth, so it holds things in place, but also doesn't leave marks behind it. So while certainly would all love like a fancy machined type, there's all types of things that you could use for it. Essentially, if it is strong, dense, and well balanced and smooth, that's going to be your best bet. The wider it is, the more that kind of weight will spread over the leather, reducing any potential risk for indentations. And basically try it out. Use it on a scrap piece of leather. If you have something that isn't specifically intended for that, it could probably work. It's basically a smooth, heavy thing. You could find those things all around. And if you do want to invest in dedicated leather weights, they're pretty cool, and you'll probably find a couple different uses for them, over the crafting period. The table. So under this mat, I have a sturdy wooden table, and for crafting, I recommend the same because we're going to be doing a fair amount of striking in some of our crafting, as well as cutting through things. And maybe if we're using a rotary knife such as this, we're going to be putting forces that are basically going back and forth that are going to be transferred into our table. And so because of that, we want a sturdy, usually thick, wooden table. That way it can absorb that shock and move that down into the floor. And so you get less vibration on your surface and less vibration that comes back into the tools that you're working with. We basically want our force to go down, in, through our tool, through our leather, and then through our table down to the floor. So the more secure and sturdy you've got that, the more stable your surface is going to be, and typically the better results you're going to get from your tools because they're putting their force through everything and much less is coming back to you. So where possible, using a very sturdy table. Options for that, if you don't have a very sturdy table or a solid core door, put that on some sawhorses and you've got a really flat and strong surface there, or any number of things that are possible. A great old workbench, things like that. If you've got a steel table, that can work as well, though it won't absorb as much as the wood, so you're going to want some type of absorption layer above that, kind of like the things that we talked about earlier, Poundo boards, Japanese cutting mats, things like that, or any type of a Novolene chopping block. But basically, the sturdier your table, the better. And something I like is a bar mat. What? We're not doing bar things here. We're doing leather things. You're right. But this works great for a number of ways. One, it's your typical bar mat, and it's intended to kind of go on a bar and catch, liquid that kind of falls through and things like that. And so you can see it's got this kind of indented surface with space in between it, a little lip on the end, and then a nice thick rubber density to it. So we could do two things with this. One, we could definitely use it as a tool absorption pad, just like our other ones that we mentioned earlier, because it's really dense and it's going to be relatively soft. On top of that, we use it for cleaning. If you're cleaning small items and you're using a little bit of water or other types of cleaners on there, as long as it isn't too much, it'll get caught right in here. And then that way, let's say we're, cleaning this belt and we're kind of rubbing a little bit of water on it or something. the excess will fall into these channels and kind of collect here and knock it on your work surface. And that could be a good way to kind of do a little bit of cleaning while having all of your tools around. And then when you're done, you simply put your dry items away. You can lift this up and bring it to a sink and just kind of pour everything out and rinse it off. And because it's intended to be kind of wet and have things on it that are going to be cleaned, you're in great shape. You just wash it off, you're set to go. And then again, it doubles as a nice dense rubber mat for other leatherworking tasks. So I think this is really cool and definitely wanted to mention that. This is a bar mat that has multi-uses for crafting. When you're looking to buy a leather working surface, there are a couple things to keep in mind and tips for you. One is it's going to be price related. There's going to be generally price ranges that smaller surfaces are going to cost less, and larger ones made of more advanced composite materials are going to cost a little more. It's not going to be, I don't think, prohibitively. The prices range isn't that huge. So it really comes down to preference in terms of what style you like, what look, what feel, and how that works for you while you're crafting. Some may like the kind of more resilience of a nylon cutting board, while the shock absorption of a Poundo board may be preferable to others. So really the tip here is try them out and see which one works best for your crafting style, because that will feel good while you're crafting and help lead to better results in your projects. And along with that, the second big tip is get a sturdy table. That's going to translate into a lot more comfortable and consistent work as you are doing any kind of technique with striking. And then also to just be more comfortable, because when you're cutting and doing other things, there won't be any wobble and shake. So a foundation of a good workshop starts with a sturdy table. And there you have it. That is a look into leather work surfaces. There are all different kinds out there. And as you get more experience, you'll likely have a preference in terms of what works really well for you and what you like the most. And once you have that set, you probably won't have to think about it all that much, because it'll just be there and you'll be doing the work on top of them. So if you have any questions, let us know. If you have other preferences or suggestions to add, I would love to hear them. And until next time, keep crafting.